stream on the channel. Today is, I meant to say, this week is Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2. Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2, chat. Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2. Right? You know? Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2. So if it's your first time ever showing up to a Think and Grow Rich stream or stream where we read books like this, what we do when we read these kind of books, we read every single chapter for a week straight. So Monday through Friday, we read the same chapter every single day. What's up, Niche? How you doing? I know it's late, but I appreciate you still being up to be in the stream. But what we do is we read these chapters for a week straight, just so they get a chance to sink in. They get a chance to really start working in our favor, you know. And then so we don't just speed run the book and not take anything from it, you know. I really feel like when you really when you really want to do something, then you really put real effort into it. And sometimes that means doing something the same over and over again for a little while, you know. So today is week 2. Today is day 3 of week 2 for Think and Grow Rich, and just chapter 2, which is desire. Thanks for the hearts on the stream. And without further ado, let's get into chapter 2, desire, the starting point of all achievement and the first step to riches. So when Edwin C. Barnes climbed down from the freight train in Orange, New Jersey, he may have resembled a tramp, but his thoughts were those of a king. As he made his way to Thomas A. Edison's office, his mind was at work. He saw himself standing in Edison's presence. He heard himself asking Mr. Edison for an opportunity to carry out the one consuming obsession of his life, a burning desire to become the business associate of the great inventor. Barnes' desire was not a hope. It was not a wish. It was a keen, pulsating desire, which transcended everything else. It was definite. The desire was not new when he approached Edison. It had been Barnes' dominating desire for a long time. In the beginning, when the desire first appeared in his mind, it may have been probably only a wish, but it was no mere wish when he appeared before Edison with it. A few years later, Edwin C. Barnes again stood before Edison in the same office where he first met the inventor. This time, thanks for the likes, chat. The desire had been translated into reality. He was in business with Edison. The dominating dream of his life had become a reality. Today, people who know Barnes envy him because of the break life yielded him. They see him in the days of his triumph without taking the trouble to investigate the causes of his success. Barnes succeeded because he chose a definite goal and placed all his energy, all his willpower, and all his effort into achieving that goal. He did not become the partner of Edison the day he arrived. He was content to start in the most menial work as long as it provided an opportunity to take even one step towards his cherished goal. 5 years passed before the chance he had been seeking made his appearance. And during all those years, not one ray of hope, not one promise of attainment of his desire had been held out to him. To everyone except himself, he appeared only another cog in the Edison business wheel. But in his own mind, he was a partner of Edison every minute of the time from the very first day he went to work there. It is a remarkable illustration of the power of a definite desire. Barnes won his goal because he wanted to be a business associate of Mr. Edison more than he wanted anything else. He created a plan by which to attain that purpose, but he burned all bridges behind him. He stood by his desire until it became the dominating obsession of his life, and finally, a fact. When he went to Orange, he did not say to himself, I will try to induce Edison to give me a job of some sort. He said, I will see Edison and put him on notice that I have come to go into business with him. He did not say I will work there for a few months, and if I get no encouragement, I will quit and get a job somewhere else. He did say, I will start anywhere. I will do anything Edison tells me to do, but before I am through, I will be his associate. He did not say, I will keep my eyes open for another opportunity in case I fail to get what I want in the Edison organization. He did say, there is but one thing in this world I am determined to have, and that is a business association with Thomas A. Edison. I will burn all bridges behind me and stake my entire future on my ability to get what I want. He left himself no possible way of retreat. He had to win or perish. That is all there is to Barnes' success story. A long while ago, a great warrior had to make a decision which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe, whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded soldiers and equipment, and then gave the order to burn the ships that had carried them. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, "You see the boats going up in smoke. That means that we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice. We win or we perish." They won. Every person who wins in any undertaking must be willing to burn his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only by doing so can one be sure of maintaining that state of mind known as a burning desire to win, essential to success. The morning after the Great Chicago Fire, a group of merchants stood on a state street, looking at the smoky remains of what had been their stores. They went to a conference to decide if they would try to rebuild or leave Chicago and start over in a more promising part of the country. They reached a decision, all except one, to leave Chicago. The merchant who decided to stay and rebuild pointed a finger at the remains of their store and said, "Gentlemen, on that very spot, I will build the world's greatest store, no matter how many times it may burn down." The store was built. It stands there today, a towering monument to the power of that state of mind known as a burning desire. The easy thing for Marshall Field to have done would have been exactly what his fellow merchants did. When the going was hard and the future looked dismal, they pulled up and went where the going seemed easier. Mark well this difference between Marshall Field and the other merchants, because it's the same difference that distinguishes Edwin C. Barnes from thousands of other young men who have worked in the Edison organization. It is the same difference that distinguishes practically all who succeed from those who fail. Every human being who understands the purpose of money wishes for it. Wishing will not bring riches, but desiring riches with a state of mind that becomes an obsession, then planning definite ways and means to acquire riches, and backing those plans with persistence, which does not recognize failure, will bring riches. The method by which desire for riches can be transmuted into a financial equivalent consists of 6 definite, practical steps. 1. Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, "I want plenty of money." Be definite as to the amount. There is a psychological reason for the definiteness, which will be described in a subsequent chapter. 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money you desire. There is no such reality as something for nothing. 3. Establish a definite date when you intend to possess the money you desire. 4. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and begin at once, whether you are ready or not, to put this plan into action. 5. Write out a clear, concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire. Name the time limit for its acquisition. State what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate it. 6. Read your written statement aloud twice daily, once just before retiring at night and once after rising in the morning. As you read, see and feel and believe yourself already in possession of the money. It is important that you follow the instructions described in these 6 steps. It is especially important that you observe and follow the instructions in the 6th paragraph. You may complain that it is impossible for you to see yourself in possession of money before you actually have it. Here is where a burning desire will come to your aid. If you truly desire money so keenly that your desire is an obsession, you will have no difficulty in convincing yourself that you will acquire it. The object is to want money and to become so determined to have it that you convince yourself you will have it. Only those who become money conscious ever accumulate great riches. Money consciousness means that the mind has become so thoroughly saturated with the desire for money that one can see oneself already in possession of it. To those who have not been schooled in the working principles of the human mind, these instructions may appear impractical. It may be helpful to all who fail to recognize the soundness of the 6 steps, to note that the information they convey was received from Andrew Carnegie, who began as an ordinary laborer in the steel mills. Despite his humble beginning, Carnegie managed to make these principles yield him a fortune of considerably more than $100 million. It may be a further help to know that the 6 steps recommended here were carefully scrutinized by Thomas A. Edison. He placed his stamp of approval upon them as being not only the steps essential for the accumulation of money, but also for the attainment of any definite goal. The steps call for no hard labor. They call for no sacrifice. do not require one to become ridiculous or credulous. To apply them calls for no great amount of education, but the successful application of these 6 steps does call for sufficient imagination to enable one to see and to understand that accumulation of money cannot be left to chance, good fortune, and luck. One must realize that all who have accumulated great fortunes first did a certain amount of dreaming, hoping, wishing, desiring, and planning before they acquired money. You may as well know also that every great leader from the dawn of civilization down to the present was a dreamer. If you do not see great riches in your imagination, you will never see them in your bank balance. Never has there been so great an opportunity for practical dreamers as now to exist. We who are in this race for riches should be encouraged to know that this dynamic world in which we live is demanding new ideas, new ways of doing things, new leaders, new inventions, new methods of teaching, new methods of marketing, new books, new literature, new applications for computers, new cures for diseases, and new approaches to every aspect of business and life. Behind this demand for new and better things, there is one quality one must possess to win, and that is definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants, and a burning desire to possess it. To accomplish this requires practical dreamers who can and will put their dreams into action. The practical dreamers have always been and always will be the pattern makers of civilization. We who desire to accumulate riches should remember that the real leaders of the world have always been people who harnessed and put into practical use the intangible, unseen forces of unborn opportunity. They have converted those forces into skyscrapers, cities, factories, airplanes, cars, better healthcare, and every form of convenience that makes life more pleasant. Tolerance and an open mind are practical necessities for the dreamer of today. Those who are afraid of new ideas are doomed before they start. And never has there been a time more favorable to pioneers than the present. There's a vast business, financial, and industrial world to be remolded and redirected along new and better lines. In planning to acquire your share of the riches, let no one influence you to scorn the dreamer. To win the big stakes in this ever-changing world, you must catch the spirit of the great pioneers of the past, whose dreams have given to civilization all that it has of value, the spirit which serves as the lifeblood of our society, your opportunity and mine to develop and market our talents. So let us not forget Columbus, who dreamed of an unknown world, staked his life on the existence of such a world, and discovered it. Or Copernicus, the great astronomer, dreamed of a multiplicity of worlds and revealed them. No one denounced him as impractical after he had triumphed. Instead, the world worshipped at his shrine, thus proving once more that success requires no apologies and failure permits no alibis. If the thing you wish to do is right and you believe in it, go ahead and do it. Put your dream across and never mind what they say if you meet with temporary defeat, for they, perhaps, do not know that every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent success. Henry Ford, poor and uneducated, dreamed of a horseless carriage. He went to work with what tools he possessed without waiting for opportunity to favor him. And now evidence of his dream belts the entire earth. He has put more wheels into operation than any man who ever lived because he was not afraid to back his dreams. Thomas Edison dreamed of a lamp that could be operated by electricity. Despite more than 10,000 failures, he stood by that dream until he made it into a physical reality. Practical dreamers do not quit. Lincoln dreamed of freedom for the black slaves, put his dream into action, and barely missed living to see a united North and South translate his dream into reality. The Wright brothers dreamed of a machine that would fly through the air. Now one may see evidence all over the world that they dreamed soundly. Marconi dreamed of a system for harnessing the intangible forces of the ether. Evidence that he did not dream in vain may be found in every radio, TV, and cell phone in the world. Moreover, Marconi's dream brought the humblest cabin and the most stately manners house side by side. It made the people of every nation on earth next door neighbors by creating a medium where news, information, and entertainment could be instantly disseminated throughout the world. It may interest you to know that Marconi's friends had him taken into custody and examined in a psychopathic hospital when he announced he had discovered a principle through which he could send messages through the air without the aid of wires or direct physical means of communication. The dreams of the day fare better. The world has become accustomed to new discoveries. Indeed, it has shown a willingness to reward the dreamer who gives the world a new idea. Ray Kroc is another good example of someone who made his dream come true. Kroc was a salesman of milkshake mixers. Most of his customers, restaurants, and diners purchased 1 or 2 units. When he received an order for 8 mixers from a small food outlet in San Bernardino, California, he visited them and to see how they could sell so many shakes. It was the busiest restaurant he had ever seen. The owners, the McDonald brothers, offered a very limited menu: hamburgers, cheeseburgers, french fries, shakes, and soft drinks, all at the lowest prices in the area. Kroc saw an opportunity. If he could open a chain of these restaurants, each as productive and profitable as this, money would flow in. He proposed the idea to the McDonald brothers and agreed to implement it. Within a few years, McDonald's not only became a top-selling food outlet in the country, but created the fast food industry. Kroc later bought out the McDonald brothers and expanded the business into an international phenomenon, making him one of the richest men of his time. The world is filled with an abundance of the opportunity which the dreamers of the past never knew. A burning desire to be and to do is a starting point from which the dreamer must take off. Dreamers are not born of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. The world no longer scoffs at dreamers, nor calls them impractical. Remember, too, that all who succeed in life get off to a bad start and pass through many heartbreaking struggles before they arrive. The turning point in lives of those who succeed usually come at the moment of some crisis, through which they were introduced to their other selves. John Bunyan wrote The Pilgrim's Progress after he had been confined in prison and sorely punished because of his religious views. O. Henry discovered the genius that slept within his brain after he had met with great misfortune and was confined in a prison cell in Columbus, Ohio. Being forced through misfortune to become acquainted with his other self and to use his imagination, he discovered himself to be a great author instead of a miserable criminal and an outcast. Strange and varied are the ways of life, and stranger still are the ways of the infinite intelligence, through which people are sometimes forced to undergo all sorts of punishment before discovering their own brains and their own capacity to create useful ideas through imagination. Edison, the world's greatest inventor and scientist, was a part-time telegraph operator. He failed innumerable times before he was driven finally to discovery of the genius that slept within his brain. Charles Dickens began by pasting labels on blackened pots. The tragedy of his first love penetrated the depths of his soul and converted him into one of the world's truly great authors. Disappointment over love affairs generally has the effect of driving people to drink and to ruin. This is because most people never learn the art of transmuting their strongest emotions into dreams of a constructive nature. Helen Keller became deaf, dumb, and blind shortly after birth. Despite her great misfortune, her name is written indelibly in the pages of history of the greats. Her entire life serves as evidence that no one is ever defeated until defeat has been accepted as a reality. Robert Burns was an illiterate country lad. He was cursed by poverty and grew up to be a drunkard. The world was made better for his living because he clothed beautiful thoughts in poetry, thereby plucking a thorn and planting a rose in its place. Poetry. Booker T. Washington was born in slavery, handicapped by race and color. Because he was tolerant and had an open mind at all times and in all subjects, and was a dreamer, he left his impression for good on an entire race. Beethoven was deaf. Milton was blind, but their names will last as long as time endures because they dreamed and translated their dreams into organized thought. Arnold Schwartz, throat itchy, is another person who converted his desire into action and achievement. He first came into the public eye as Mr. Universe, a glorified weightlifter. But Schwartz was not a typical muscle man. He was a man with dreams and goals. He achieved them by becoming a wealthy businessman, one of the highest paid movie stars, and eventually governor of California. Born and raised in Austria, as a child he began training as a weightlifter. At 18, he won his first bodybuilding contest and the first of 5 consecutive Mr. Universe titles. He immigrated to the United States and continued winning similar contests. And although he had accomplished more than any other person in the art of bodybuilding, it was no longer a challenge. He saw other areas where he could use his talents. His training and physical development taught him that there was a need for knowledge about physical fitness. He had that knowledge and wanted to share it. He wrote an autobiography, Arnold: The Education of a Bodybuilder, which became a bestseller. He followed it with a book on bodybuilding for women, showing female readers how to use weight training to get into shape. This led to the creation of a mail-order exercise business and a company to produce bodybuilding events. These businesses started him on the road to business success. His next goal was to become a movie star. Even before he had secured his first movie role, he set himself a goal to be as big in movies as he was in bodybuilding. After turning down minor roles, his persistence paid off when he was cast as the lead in Conan the Barbarian. This led to a series of action films that made him one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Success in movies did not make Schwarzenegger complacent. I don't want to say his last name because it can be misconstrued. I'm not gonna lie. I've been saying Schwartz for a reason, but I want to underline something real quick, because I want to come back to it. They did not make Schwartz complacent. He set new goals for himself. This time in the world of business, he invested in real estate, created a restaurant chain, and became actively involved in other enterprises, and became a multimillionaire. As his success mounted, however, he added what became his dream goal to serve the community. He traveled around the country to promote health and fitness to the youth. He went to the inner cities and inspired the kids to eschew violence and crime, to say no to drugs, guns, and gangs, and yes, to education. He has taken an active leadership role in several organizations dedicated to physical health and fitness. In 2003, Schwartz threw his hat into the ring and was overwhelmingly elected as the new governor of California. You can learn much from this man. Setting goals, you're not limited to any one area. Schwartz could have limited his future to bodybuilding and become quite successful, but he dreamed of much more, set higher goals, and strove to reach them. He learned from his successes and adapted his knowledge in other aspects of his life. Like Schwartz, do not be discouraged by criticism. Critics belittled his acting ability in his first films, but he was not dissuaded and pursued his goal to become one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Now, before passing to the next chapter, killing anew in your mind the fire of hope, faith, courage, and tolerance. If you have these states of mind and a working knowledge of the principles described, all else that you need will come to you when you are ready for it. Let Emerson state the thought in these words: every proverb, every book, every byword that belongs to thee for aid and comfort shall surely come home through an open or winding passages. Every friend whom not thy fantastic will, but the great and tender soul in thee craveth, shall lock thee in his embrace. There's a difference between wishing for a thing and being ready to receive it. No one is ready for a thing until he believes he can acquire it. The state of mind must be belief, not mere hope or a wish. Open-mindedness is essential for belief. Closed minds do not inspire faith, courage, or belief. Remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity, than is required to accept misery and poverty. A great poet has correctly stated this universal truth through these lines: I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is just an employer. He gives you what you ask, but once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I had to ask for life would have willingly paid. Mary Kay Ash, the founder of Mary Kay Cosmetics, attributed her success to the development of self-confidence and faith in herself, and in all the people in her vast organization, which now consists of more than 250,000 independent beauty consultants worldwide. Her sales career began 25 years earlier when she joined Stanley Home Products, and she often commented that she was not at all successful during her first year and was ready to give up. This changed when she attended her first Stanley sales seminar. She reported, there I saw this tall, svelte, pretty, successful woman crowned queen as a reward for being the best in a company contest. I determined to be that queen the following year, which seemed impossible. However, I decided to go up and talk to the president and tell him that I intended to be queen next year. Mr. Beveridge didn't laugh at me, but he looked me in my eye, held my hand, and said, somehow I think you will. Those 5 words drove me, and the next year I was queen. Mary Kay preached and practiced that first step in achieving success is to firmly believe that you're an excellent person who believes and deserves success. And in an article in Personal Excellence, she suggested some exercises to help create your image of excellence and begin to establish an atmosphere of success in your life. Here are some of her suggestions. 1. Imagine yourself successful. Always picture yourself successful. Visualize the person you desire to become. Set aside time each day to be alone and undisturbed. Get comfortable and relax. Close your eyes and concentrate on your desires and goals. See yourself in this new environment capable and self-confident. 2. Reflect on your past successes. Every success, be it large or small, is proof that you are capable of achieving more successes. Celebrate each success. You can recall it when you begin to lose faith in yourself. 3. Set definite goals. Have a clear direction of where you want to go. Be aware when you begin to deviate from these goals and take immediate corrective action. 4. Respond positively to life. Develop a positive self-image. Your image, your reactions to life, and your decisions are completely within your control. And now, desire outwits Mother Nature. As a fitting climax to this chapter, I wish to introduce one of the most unusual people I have ever known. I first saw him a few minutes after he was born. He came into this world without any physical sign of ears, and the doctor admitted, when pressed for an opinion, that the child might be deaf and mute for life. I challenged the doctor's opinion. I had the right to do so. I was the child's father. I, too, reached a decision and rendered an opinion, but I expressed the opinion silently, in the secrecy of my own heart. I decided that my son would hear and speak. Nature could send me a child without ears, but nature could not induce me to accept the reality of the affliction. In my own mind, I knew that my son would hear and speak. How? I was sure there must be a way, and I knew I would find it. I thought of the words of the immortal Emerson. The whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only to obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we shall hear the right word. That word, desire. More than anything else, I desired that my son should not be deaf and mute. From that desire, I never receded, not for a second. Many years previously, I had written our limitations are those we set up in our own minds. For the first time, I wondered if that statement were true. Lying on the bed in front of me was a newly born child without natural equipment of hearing. And even though he might hear and speak, he was obviously disfigured for life. Surely, this was a limitation which that child had not set up in his own mind. What could I do about it? Somehow, I would find a way to transplant into that child's mind my own burning desire for ways and means of conveying sound to his brain without the aid of ears. As soon as the child was old enough to cooperate, I would fill his mind so completely with a burning desire to hear that nature would, by means of her own, translate into physical reality. All this thinking took place in my own mind, and I spoke of it to no one. Every day I renewed the pledge I had to myself, not to accept a death for a son. As he grew older and began to take notice of things around him, we observed that he had a slight degree of hearing. When he reached the age when children usually begin talking, he made no attempt to speak, but we can tell by his actions that he could hear certain words slightly. That was all I needed to know. I was convinced that if he could hear even slightly, he might develop still greater hearing capacity. Then something happened which gave me hope. It came from an entirely unexpected source. We bought a record player. When the child heard the music for the first time, he went to ecstasies and promptly appropriated the machine. He soon showed a preference for certain records. Among them, It's a Long Way to Tipperary. On one occasion, he played a piece over and over for almost 2 hours, standing in front of the record player with his teeth clamped on the edge of the case. The significance of this self-formed habit of his did not become clear until years later, for we had never heard of this principle of bone conduction of sound at that time. Shortly after he appropriated the record player, I discovered that he could hear me quite clearly when I spoke with my lips, touching his mastoid behind the ear, or at the base of the brain. These discoveries placed in my possession the necessary media by which I began to translate into my reality my burning desire to help my son develop hearing and speech. By that time, he was making stabs at speaking certain words. The outlook was far from encouraging, but desire backed by faith knows no such word is impossible. Having determined that he could hear the sound of my voice plainly, I began immediately to transfer to his mind the desire to hear and speak. I soon discovered that the child enjoyed bedtime stories, so I went to work, creating stories designed to develop him in self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and to be normal. There was one story in particular which I emphasized by giving it some new and dramatic coloring each time it was told. It was designed to plant in his mind the thought of his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Despite the fact that all philosophy I had examined clearly indicated that every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage, I must confess that I had not the slightest idea how this affliction could ever become an asset. However, I continued my practice of wrapping that philosophy in bedtime stories, hoping the time would come when he would find some plan by which his handicap could be made to serve some useful purpose. Reason told me plainly that there was no adequate compensation for the lack of ears and natural hearing equipment. Desire backed by faith pushed reason aside and inspired me to carry on. As I analyze the experience in retrospect, I can see now that my son's faith in me had much to do with the astounding results. He did not question anything I told him. I sold him the idea that he had a distinct advantage over his older brother, and that his advantage would reflect itself in many ways. For example, teachers in school would observe that he had no ears, and because of this, they would show him special attention and treat him with extraordinary kindness. They always did. His mother saw to that by visiting the teachers and arranging with them to give the child the extra attention necessary. I sold him the idea too, that when he became old enough to sell newspapers, he would have a big advantage over his older brother, as people would pay him extra money for his wares because they could see he was a bright, industrious boy despite the fact he had no ears. We noticed that gradually the child's hearing was improving. Moreover, he had not the slightest tendency to be self-conscious because of his affliction. When he was about 7, he showed the first evidence that our method of service in his mind was bearing fruit. For several months, he begged for the privilege of selling newspapers, but his mother would not give her consent. She was afraid that his deafness made it unsafe for him to go out on the street alone. Finally, he took matters in his own hands. One afternoon, when he was left at home with the servants, he climbed through the kitchen window, shined to the ground, and set out on his own. He borrowed 6 cents in capital from the neighborhood shoemaker and invested it in papers, sold out, reinvested it, and kept repeating until late in the evening. After balancing his accounts and paying back the 6 cents he had borrowed from the banker, he had a net profit of 42 cents. When we got home that night, we found him in the bed asleep with the money tightly clenched in his hand. His mother opened his hand and removed the coins and cried. Of all things, crying over her son's first victory seemed so inappropriate. My reaction was the reverse. I laughed heartily, for I knew that my endeavor to plant in the child's mind an attitude of faith in himself had been successful. His mother saw in his first business venture a little deaf boy who had gone out in the streets and risked his life to earn money. I saw a brave, ambitious, self-reliant little businessman whose stock in himself had just increased 100% because he had gone into business on his own initiative and had won. The transaction pleased me because I knew he had given evidence of a trait of resourcefulness that would go with him all through life. Later events proved this to be true. When his older brother wanted something, he would lie on the floor, kick his feet in the air, and cry for it and get it. When the little deaf boy wanted something, he would plan a way to earn the money, then buy it for himself. He still follows that plan. Truly, my own son has taught me that handicaps can be converted into stepping stones on which one may climb towards some worthy goal, unless they accept it as obstacles and use as alibis. The little deaf boy went through the grades, high school and college without being able to hear his teachers, except when they shouted loudly at close range. He did not go to school for the deaf. We would not permit him to learn sign language. We were determined that he should live a normal life and associate with normal children. And we still backed that decision, although it cost us many heated debates with school officials. While he was in school, he tried an electrical hearing aid, but it was of no value to him. We believe this was due to the condition that was disclosed when the child was 6. Dr. J. Gordon Wilson of Chicago operated on one side of the boy's head and discovered there was no sign of natural hearing equipment. During his last week in college, 18 years after the operation, something happened which marked the most important turning point of his life. Through what seemed to be mere chance, he came into possession of another electrical hearing device which was sent to him on a trial. He was slow about testing it, due to his disappointment with a similar device. Finally, he picked the instrument up and more or less carelessly placed it on his head, hooked up the battery, and lo, as if by a stroke of magic, his lifelong desire for normal hearing became a reality. For the first time in his life, he had heard practically as well as any person with normal hearing. God moves in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. Overjoyed because of the changed world that had been brought to him through his hearing device, he rushed to the telephone, called his mother, and heard her voice perfectly. The next day, he plainly heard the voices of his professors in class for the first time in his life. He heard the radio. He heard the cinema for the first time in his life. He could converse freely with other people without having them to speak loudly. Truly, he had come into the possession of a changed world. We had refused to accept nature's error, and by persistent desire, we had induced nature to correct that error through only the practical means available. Desire had commenced to pay dividends, but the victory was not yet complete. the boy still had to find a definite and practical way to convert his handicap into an equivalent asset. Hardly realizing the significance of what had already been accomplished, but intoxicated with the joy of his newly discovered world of sound, he wrote a letter to the manufacturer of the hearing aid, enthusiastically describing in his experience something in his letter, something perhaps which was not written on the lines but between them, caused the company to invite him to New York. When he arrived, he was escorted through the factory while talking to the chief engineer, telling him about his changed world. A hunch, an idea, or an inspiration, call it what you wish, flashed into his mind. It was this impulse of thought which converted his affliction into an asset, destined to pay dividends of both money and happiness to thousands for all to come. The sum and substance of that impulse of thought was this. It occurred to him that he might be of the help to millions of the deaf people who will go through life without the benefit of hearing devices. If he could find a way to tell them the story of his changed world, and then and there, he reached a decision to devote the remainder of his life to providing a useful service to the hard of hearing. For an entire month, he carried out intensive research. He analyzed the entire marketing system of the manufacturer of the hearing device and created ways and means of communicating with the hard of hearing all over the world for the purpose of sharing with them his newly discovered changed world. When this was done, he wrote a 2-year plan based upon his findings. On presenting the plan to the company, he was instantly given a position for the purpose of carrying out his ambition. Little did he dream, when he went to work, that it was destined to bring hope and practical relief to thousands of deaf people who, without his help, would have been doomed forever to deaf mutism. Shortly after he became associated with the manufacturer of his hearing aid, he invited me to attend a class conducted by his company for the purpose of teaching deaf mutes to hear and speak. I had never heard of such a form of education. Therefore, I visited the class skeptical, but hopeful that my time would not be entirely wasted. Here I saw a demonstration that gave me a greatly enlarged vision of what I had done to arouse and keep alive in my son's mind the desire for normal hearing. I saw deaf mutes actually being taught to hear and speak through application of the same self-principle I had used more than 20 years previously in saving my son from deaf mutism. Thus, through some strange turn of the will of fate, my son Blair and I were destined to aid in correcting deaf mutism for those as yet unborn. There is no doubt in my mind that Blair would have been a deaf mute all his life if his mother and I had not managed to shape his mind as we did. When Blair was an adult, Dr. Irvin Voorhees, a noted specialist on such cases, examined him thoroughly. He was astounded when he learned how well my son hears and speaks, and said his examination indicates that theoretically the boy should not be able to hear at all. But the lad does hear, despite the fact that the x-ray pictures show no opening in the skull whatsoever from where his ears should be to the brain. Excuse me. When I planted in his mind the desire to hear and talk and live as a normal person, there went with the impulse some strange influence which caused nature to become bridge builder and span the gulf of silence between his brain and the outer world by some means which the keenest medical specialists have not been able to interpret. It would be sacrilege for me to even conjecture as to how nature performed this miracle. It would be unforgivable if I neglected to tell the world as much as I know of the humble part I assumed in the strange experience. It is my duty and privilege to say I believe, and not without reason, that nothing is impossible to the person who backs desire with enduring faith. I have no doubt that a burning desire has devious ways of transmuting itself into its physical equivalent. Blair desired normal hearing, and now he has it. He was born with a handicap, which might have easily sent one with a less defined desire to the street with a bundle of pencils and a tin cup. That handicap now promises to serve as a medium by which he will render useful service to many millions of hard of hearing, as well as to give him useful employment as adequate financial compensation for the remainder of his life. The little white lies I planted in his mind when he was a child led him to believe his affliction would become a great asset on which he could capitalize and have been justified. There is nothing, right or wrong, which belief plus burning desire cannot make real. These qualities are free to everyone. In all my experience in dealing with men and women who have personal problems, I have never handled a single case which more definitely demonstrates the power of desire. Authors sometimes make the mistake of writing on subjects of which they have but superficial or very elementary knowledge. It has been my good fortune to have the privilege of testing the soundness of the power of desire through the affliction of my own son. Perhaps it was providential that the experience came as it did, for surely no one is better prepared than he to serve as an example of what happens when desire is put to the test. If Mother Nature bends to the will of desire, is it logical that mere man can defeat a burning desire? Strange and imponderable is the power of the human mind. We do not understand that the method by which it uses every circumstance, every individual, every physical thing within its reach as a means of transmuting desire into its physical counterpart. Perhaps science will uncover the secret. And I planted in my son's mind the desire to hear and speak as any normal person hears and speaks. That desire has now become a reality. I planted in his mind the desire to convert his greatest handicap into his greatest asset. The desire has been realized. The modus operandi by which this astounding result was achieved is not hard to describe. It consisted of three very definite facts. First, I mixed faith with the desire for normal hearing, which I passed on to my son. Second, I communicated my desire to him in every conceivable way available, through persistent, continuous effort over a period of years. Third, he believed me. Several years ago, one of my business associates became ill. He became worse as time went on and finally was taken to the hospital for an operation. Just before he was wheeled into the operating room, I took a look at him and wondered how anybody as thin and as emaciated as he could possibly go through a major operation successfully. The doctor warned me that there was little, if any, chance of ever seeing him alive again, but that was a doctor's opinion. It was not the opinion of the patient. Just before he was wheeled away, he whispered feebly, "Do not be disturbed, Chief. I will be out of here in a few days." The attending nurse looked at me with pity, but the patient did come through safely. After it was all over, the physician said, nothing but his own desire to live saved him. He would never have pulled through if he had not refused to accept the possibility of death. I believe in the power of desire backed by faith because I have seen this power lift people from lowly beginnings to places of power and wealth. I have seen it rob the graves of their victims. I have seen it serve as a medium by which people staged a comeback after having been defeated 100 different ways. I have seen it provide my own son with a normal, happy, successful life despite nature having sent him into the world without ears. How can one harness and use the power of desire? This has been answered through this chapter and the subsequent chapters of this book. I wish to convey the thought that all achievement, no matter what its nature or purpose, must begin with an intense, burning desire for something definite. Through some strange and powerful principle of mental chemistry, nature wraps up in the impulse of strong desire that something which recognizes no such word as impossible and accepts no reality as failure. Sorry, Chad. I always get a little emotional towards the end of that. I'm not gonna lie. Reading this, I always feel it. Reading the end of this, I always feel it. So I always have to catch myself a little bit. Apologize for the stuttering. My mouth is extremely dry. I tried the honey, bro, but my mouth is so dry. I think I might be having a little bit of allergies. My eyes are a little dry, my mouth's dry. I think I'm having some allergies, maybe, possibly. But I'm not allergic to anything. It doesn't make any sense. But let's talk about chapter 2. Desire, the starting point of all achievement. Desire, the starting point of all achievement. And what did I underline earlier? This is what I want to talk about today. For today's discussion for this chapter, I want to talk about this piece right here. I underlined it for a reason as I was reading because I knew this is what I wanted to talk about. As I read it, I knew this is what I wanted to talk about. Please focus. This is from Schwartz's piece. This is from Schwartz's piece, right? So after turning down minor roles, his persistence paid off when he was cast as a lead in Conan the Barbarian. After turning down minor roles, his persistence paid off when he was cast as a lead in Conan the Barbarian. I personally have the same story for how I started with what I do now for a living, right? And I'm sure everybody can possibly relate to this story, right? So I first separated from the military like 4 years ago now, which is crazy, right? 4 years ago now. I was trying to get a job, and I was trying to get a remote job. That was my whole purpose. Was I was going to get a remote job because my wife now, right? She wasn't my wife then, but my wife now, she was still in the military, right? And if I wanted us to work out, I wouldn't be able to just find a job anywhere to be able to and be able to expect the relationship to still be able to last, right? Because she probably be sent somewhere, and then I'd be stuck wherever I am at, and or trying to go somewhere and find a job somewhere. It'll just been so much to deal with and work with, right? So in my mind, I set my goal as getting a remote job, getting a certain amount of money. I'm not gonna say how much money I make, but getting a certain amount of money, and I was not gonna back down from my goal, right? Now, in that process, I took a lot of rejection, right? But during the rejection, uh, uh, it made me better. I definitely cried. I definitely cried. Definitely hurt. Definitely hurt. Right. I knew I was more than qualified enough for all the jobs I applied for. I knew I was more than qualified enough for all the jobs I applied for. Right. Um, but I got rejected several times on that way. Right. Um, and then uh, but like I left myself a window, right? And this is go back to what we've been reading about today. I left myself a window. I left myself a door a little bit, right? I left myself a little door to be able to stick my foot out the door in case I needed to like flee for safety, right? Um, and then one day, um, uh, my wife now she said, and she's not gonna like this, but it's okay. It's not a big deal. She said, I can get you a job, but it won't be what you're looking for, right? I can help the people at work want to help you get a job, but it won't be what you're looking for. And to me, that hurt me. To me personally, that hurt me, right? Um, and that closed the door. That moment closed the door completely for me. I slammed the door shut. Not on her, but figuratively, I slammed the door shut. Um, on the door that I left open, on the crack in the door I left open, I slammed the door shut, right? Because it felt like um, uh, that the people around me didn't believe I could achieve what I said I was gonna be able to achieve, right? And I can understand that. To me myself, I left the door slightly open, right? So I could see that, right? But then from that moment forward, I slammed the door. From that moment forward, I slammed the door. The door was closed. And that night, I prayed. That night, I prayed. I said, God, I slammed the door. I said, God, hey, I slammed the door. Um, this is the only way. This is the only avenue I'm willing to take, right? Um, and like not even a couple days later, I got two job offers for two jobs for what I was looking for, right? I took the better one of the two, right? I ended up getting hired for the better one of the two. But until I closed the door and I was committed to my goal, um, I was in a loop. I was in a loop of going and experiencing things I didn't have to experience, right? And after turning down minor roles, Arnold's persistence paid off, right? The door might have been open, right? He might have had the door open, right? And that's why he was receiving those minor roles to test him on the way to his path, right? But he was convinced. He slammed the door shut. He kept the door shut on that stuff, on those other goals, because he knew what his end goal was. He always knew what his end goal was. And when he closed the door, he got his role as Conan the Barbarian, right? Um, and that's really what I wanted to emphasize today. Sometimes we don't realize we left the door open a little bit, right? And we want to get to a goal, but we're not sure why we can't get to the goal, right? Um, but it's because the door is still open. You still got the door open just a little bit. It's all it takes for you to want to run backwards, that little safety net that you want to run back to, right? To keep you from getting to where you actually you know you can get to, right? But when you close that door, when you stick to that goal, when you close that door and you go towards your goal wholeheartedly, full force, and you won't take no for an answer, then the door is open, right? Not even a couple days later, that's when I got the job, bro. I did my interview like a couple days, the same week. I did my interview for that job, and I got the job that same week, and it was just it's just a testament. I always remember that whenever I feel bad about myself, whenever I start to feel down, I remember that story. I remember that time, right? Um, and I remind myself sometimes you got to shut the door and jump out the window. You got to shut the door and jump out the window. You got to shut the door and jump out the window. Um, and in that time of my life, I had to shut the door and jump out the window. Not literally, figuratively. Please don't jump out the windows. That's not what I mean. But sometimes you gotta shut that door and jump out the window, in order to get to where you want to be at. Because you keep having that door open, you're gonna keep going back to that door. You can keep that door gonna open a little bit more. It's gonna look real nice to go back and go take something that may be, and I don't want to come off in any type of way here, but maybe beneath you, right? That may be beneath you. Maybe you put in way too much effort to accept that role, right? Or to accept whatever that you put in way too much effort into you, into your goals, into your future to accept something like that. So don't walk through that door. Slam that door shut and jump out the window, right? Go full force towards that goal. Slam that door and jump out the window, right? And that's really what I wanted to talk about. That's really gonna be today's discussion about. It's not really a discussion. It's really more of a statement. I really wanted to tell that story. When I read that, I knew I was gonna tell that story. That sometimes you really do have to slam that door. You really have to check yourself and see if you have that door still open. That door is still open, right? Are you still leave yourself an escape route just in case you feel like it's not gonna work out? You can't leave that door open. You can't think about what if it's not gonna work out. And and that moment changed the whole course of my life. That moment changed the whole course of my life. Changed everything from that changed the whole course of my life. I could have took one of those other jobs or went somewhere else and got a job somewhere else and not been doing and not stuck to my goal, not stuck to what I said I was going to do, right? We talked about this yesterday, keep your promises. Or not even yesterday, today we said talk about keep your promises. It's crazy how things play into each other. We talk about keep your promises. You gotta keep your promise to yourself. And in that moment, I had to keep my promise to myself. I told myself what I was gonna do, and that was a promise I made to me that I was gonna do it, right? And something you got to keep your promises. You got to keep your promises, and that's really what I want to talk about. That's really just it. I'm saving all the rest of the book, all the rest of for the next couple of days, because this is a 20-page chapter. It's a 20-page chapter, and if we do a discussion for a 20-page chapter with all that's in this chapter, with all these different examples, we'd be talking for like 3 hours. We'd be talking for like 3 hours, and I'll just be, but I want to be more precise and choose specific things to talk about as we go, right? If you really want something, you got to close the door. That door that was behind you, you got to shut it, right? That door, it ain't worth going back to. You decided you wanted to leave that door in the first place. You already told yourself you didn't want to go that way anyways, so you might as well close it, right? I just wanted to share that with y'all from my own personal experience, right? When you decide to close that door, when you decide to close that door that was behind you, the door that's in front of you really just swings right open, right? When that was in the first chapter. It's crazy how as soon as it starts coming in, it starts to pour in, and you wonder where it was this whole time, right? That's what it said in chapter 1. As soon as that door opens and what you want starts coming in, you wonder where it was this whole time, right? And maybe I don't. We'll talk about it at a different time. It's something else. We'll talk about it a different time. I don't want to say this too long. I know myself very well. I'm not going to do that, if you really want something, if that truly is what you want, then close the other door. If that's truly what you want, then close the other door. And that's it. That's it. That's the end of today's Think and Grow Rich, Chapter 2, Week 2's reading. Hope y'all enjoyed. Little man always shows up. He always just knows I'm about to be finished reading or somehow, some way, right? So we're going to hit this outro with Little Man's Belly. We all got that limitless core, baby. I appreciate you. I might even love you, but I'm for sure glad you woke up today. I'm for sure glad you woke up today. Thank you for your presence as always. Thank you for just being here. Thank you for listening to me tell my own story sometimes. Thank you for listening to me discuss about the things that we read. And if you want to, I definitely want to see what you guys think about the books and stuff that we read, right? What's up with you, DeVrium Flameclaw? I definitely want to hear what you guys think about the book that we're reading, the chapter that we read and stuff. So feel free to throw your input in there, no matter when the book is reading, no matter what part of the book I'm in. If you have something that you want to say about any part of the book as I'm reading or after I read, then feel free to throw that in the chat. And I'm going to see y'all the next time we go live, which either It's night or tomorrow. So, peace. You have a great rest of your night, and I appreciate you as always. You have a great and peaceful, enjoyable. Oh man, I was not ready for that. Enjoyable rest of your night. Peace.